And good morning. I'm just going to stay put right here if you don't mind. I am so happy to see so many friends, so many alumni friends. My goodness. Give yourselves a cheer. This morning. What a wonderful gathering. And as we go through the day, we're going to get to a point where every seat will be full. Thank you for, we have masks indoors. If you don't want to wear your mask, we're not going to be critical of that. I took my mask on because I'm speaking. And as you know, a little housekeeping before we get going. You know we have restrooms on the corridor. If you haven't been here for a while, we have them on both ends of the marble corridor now. Imagine that. So you can go either way and find indoor plumbing here, which we're very happy to have. We have, who's here from the class of 72? Let's see the 72s. Happy reunion! 72 is our really big reunion, and only to be bested by 67, which celebrates every reunion every year. Where's 67? Let's see it. Any 67s here? They're still down at the hotel. They're raising a ruckus in the hotel, I know that. And how about the class of 71 out in force to support our speakers? There's the class of 71. Oh yeah, everybody came to support Mary Evelyn and John this morning. And many other classes. I'm not going to call every other class because we wouldn't get through the morning. But I want to thank you so much for coming for the Environmental Justice Symposium that is part of this glorious 125th anniversary celebration we're having. I know that some of you were in classes yesterday and the day before. I've heard good reports. I hope that was good. I hope it made you want to come back to school. You should have master's degrees. You can never get enough, but I hear cheering. You're clapping and cheering. Thank you. Okay. If you have not been over to the Payton Academic Center, maybe on a walkabout, you can go over and just see our beautiful laboratories and classrooms, all state-of-the-art. And our classrooms in Maine and our spaces have improved technologically. You see our new big screens, and we have Wi-Fi in here if you need Wi-Fi, and we do AV. Everything is so modern. It's hard to express how modern we've become. But it's all good because it's all about teaching and learning at Trinity, and it's so important. So today we're having a wonderful symposium all day. Around you in this room, you see samples of some of the student work. These are research posters that is a method that scientists know is a way for scientists to display their research in one or two panels. Our students have prepared those research posters. This is what they're doing. So on breaks, you were welcome to go around the room and see some of the student research. We also have some of the student photography here, and these are all pictures taken by our students, photographs, some of which were taken on iPhones, I'm told. So they're learning the skills of photography even on iPhones. We don't do wet lab anymore. Who remembers going to the wet lab and having to process photos that way? Well, that's gone away in the digital age. So we teach photography as photography, and it's wonderful. We teach many things, as you saw in the classes the last 2 days. I want to thank the faculty who opened their classes for those days. I think it was an edifying experience for all. I am grateful, before we go in, I'm also grateful, and this may be the last time I have a chance to say it, to all of the staff who made this day possible. I can't begin to tell you. If you need anything, they will help you to find your way. After the morning program, we'll break for lunch. You're going to have lunch and fine dining in Alumni Hall, as we all did as students. And when you're in Alumni Hall, look around so you will see all the needs of Alumni Hall. That we refurbish that building to be really appropriate for the modern age. I hope you will understand why we need to do that. It's a $50 million project in today's dollars, and if we don't get going soon, it won't be 50 million anymore. It'll be a higher figure. So we want to get it done because we have the beautiful academic center, we have the beautiful sports center, which if you want to go down and sit in the hot tub, you're welcome to, or work out in the fitness center. We want all of our facilities here to match the beauty of our brand new facilities. Or, as someone reminds me, the sports center is now 20 years old. I thought it was a new building, but it still looks new, and the academic center. So that's a little housekeeping. While you are here at Trinity, you are us. This is your home too, and I want you, our alums, to feel comfortable and welcome, and please go wherever you want to go, see whatever you want to see, ask whatever you want to ask. I want you to go from Trinity this weekend just fired up with what a wonderful, wonderful institution this is. I'm just going to also say a footnote. We are very committed to keeping our women's college at Trinity. I just want to assure all alums in this day and age. You can clap. Trinity today, you may know, we are a university because we have multiple academic units and we give multiple credentials. We give associate degrees, we have baccalaureate degrees, which is what the College of Arts and Science, our women's college, does. We also have graduate degrees, and a whole range of graduate degrees. We don't do doctorates yet, but we've talked about it from time to time. Healthcare is one of our really big initiatives. The nursing program is huge. We work with all the area hospitals. We do occupational therapy, health services. We do public health, which is growing. We're starting a bachelor's in social work next year. So there's a lot going on. But the liberal arts are still our core, still the strongest part of what we do. Every undergraduate, yes, cheer for that. Cheer for that. Every undergraduate, liberal arts, gen ed, whatever her major, even nursing or business, they all have to take English and history and philosophy. So be assured, it's all there, it's all in the package, and our goal is to make sure that our graduates carry all of those values that we hold dear into their workplaces, into their communities, and are able to do that in the future. But you might ask, well, can we sustain a women's college today? There's only 9 institutions in America that still identify as Catholic women's colleges, and we are one of the 9. You might have heard that Notre Dame in Baltimore just announced they're going co-ed. We'll let them go. We feel so strongly that what we do here at Trinity for the women we work with is so important that we have to keep doing it. And it's really important, and the way you support us is really important to make that happen. And we're very proud of that. We have women from Washington. Half of our students are from Washington. About another third are from Maryland. So we're a regional institution. We also are very proud today, and you see our students here. Trinity is today classified by the Department of Education. We are a predominantly Black institution. We are also a Hispanic serving institution. So we have both. I'll tell you another secret. There's only 3 private colleges in America that have both designations, and we're the only Catholic college in America that has the predominantly Black designation, the only Catholic college in America. That's important. It's important to feel proud of that, and it's important to support this mission and ministry that we do today. It's so important for our students, and you'll see how brilliant and glorious our students are. Our students, thanks to our great faculty, our students just thrive. And the students work hard. You're going to hear them throughout the day. They are glorious, and you are proud of them. I am proud of them too. Why environmental justice on this historic weekend as we celebrate Trinity's 125th? We had a lot of topics we could have chosen. Certainly, we could have had a wonderful Shakespeare festival, and that would have made the English faculty very happy. We could have had a glorious science festival in general because our STEM programs are so strong. We could have done healthcare. We could have done psychology and the social sciences. But here's the thing. A couple of years ago, Pope Francis challenged all of us in the Catholic community to think about the care and stewardship of our environment, Laudato Si. You're going to hear a lot about Laudato Si today. Here at Trinity, we felt very challenged to think about how do we address the climate crisis and the environmental crisis in this world. We here at Trinity have a beautiful campus. We start with our own campus. What's the environment here? You're going to have a chance to walk around campus if you wish after lunch today to talk about the trees. And you might think, well, trees are really important. Trees are part of the ecosystem. And we have had a great deal of awareness and and coming to even better understanding of how we preserve our own tree canopy here as part of our commitment to justice, how we recycle, how we manage our environment. We have been inspired in this by the great scholars you're going to hear from in a minute, our very own Mary Evelyn Tucker, class of 1971. You can share it. And the wonderful partner of time, Dr. John Grimm. And both Mary Evelyn and John have worked with us across the last few years to help us think about how do we develop our environmental justice program. And they have just been wonderful and also great support. We're very grateful to them. And to the class of 71, who have also contributed greatly to support this program. In all of this, we have come to the belief that having this value-centered piece of our not only our STEM curriculum, but it's also our policy curriculum, it's our ethics curriculum, it's our religion curriculum. All of this is essential for Trinity to make its mark on this world. We don't just educate for the sake of educating, we educate with purpose in order to have our students understand how to translate values into action out in the world, and how you take a commitment to environmental sustainability and climate control into the world and make a difference in whether how you vote or how you make policy or how you influence policy. This is all very important, but it starts with understanding the basics. So that's how we have chosen, that's why we moved into this space in a way that is, I think, really important and crucial. So with all of that, that's a bit of introduction about Trinity today and why we do what we do. This is our 125th anniversary, 125th anniversary. It just gives my heart so much joy to be able to say that because there were times when people weren't sure we were going to make it to our, when I became president, people weren't sure we'd make it to our 95th anniversary. I've been here for the 95th, that's how long I've been here. So we're here, and my goal with this anniversary is to build a platform for Trinity's 200th. That's what I said. We're going to be on to Trinity 200, and we're going to skip 150, go right on to the 200th. So with that, now that everybody's teed up and primed and everybody has their spaces, there is nothing that gives me greater joy than being able to introduce one of our students. Because our students are the reason we get up in the morning. They're the reason why we still have Trinity every day. They're the reason why you support us in this great work, this very important and somewhat unique work in all of American higher education. And to introduce Mary Ellen and John this morning, I am just so pleased that we have a young woman here who is an example of the great women of Trinity. She is a business administration major and has an environmental justice minor. And Samkesa Vest-Kinniton is the class of 2024. I'm showing my age. 2024. So Samkesa, please take the podium and introduce our speakers today.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Samkesa Vest-Kinniton, and I'll be introducing Dr. Mary Evelyn Tucker and Dr. John Grimm. Mary Evelyn Tucker and Dr. John Grimm are visionaries who are reimagining how we think about the future of our planet Earth. Through the Yale Forum of Religion and Ecology, they have brought together religion, science, and humanities into a coherent movement to consider the moral imperative of repairing our deteriorating environment. With joint appointments at the Yale School of Environment and Yale Divinity School, they've created Journey of the Universe, an award-winning documentary and multimedia educational project about the relationship of humanities to the environment. Mary Evelyn Tucker's academic journey started at Trinity, where she earned her bachelor's in history and English in 1971. And a membership in Phi Beta Kappa. She then taught English in Japan at Trinity's sister college, Notre Dame Shishin University. Subsequently, she earned her her master's in history of religion at Fordham, and her PhD at Columbia. John Grimm earned his bachelor's in theology and history at St. John's University in Minnesota, and then entered the master's program in history of religion at Fordham, where he also earned his PhD, with special interest in indigenous traditions, particularly Native American religions. They met during their graduate years at Fordham, where they both studied under the renowned scholar Thomas Merry. They soon married and embarked on their remarkable careers. Trinity is deeply grateful for their inspiration, guidance, and generosity and their support of the Environmental Studies program at Trinity. We are eager to hear their keynote address. Please welcome me and join me in welcoming Dr. Mary Evelyn Tucker and Dr. John Grimm.
Thank you so much. That was lovely. Thank you, Pat, for all your leadership, your comments. The fact that we are celebrating 125 years is in no small measure due to Pat, her terrific development. So I want to begin this 3-hour talk with thanks to Trinity. Because, sometimes we become more aware as we get older what we are grateful for. And certainly Trinity is really on the top of my list for reasons that became clearer and clearer, some of which were mentioned in the introduction. But, just to be here, as many of you will recall, in the 60s, and I was very involved in civil rights, the anti-Vietnam War, and so on, and that has influenced this whole project, which we'll talk about in a minute. But as well, I worked in Muskie's office, the opportunities to be down in the Capitol. I was walking around yesterday and said, this is an amazing place to go to college. And the cultural resources, the Smithsonian, Arena Theater, and so on. Amazing. I used to charge down there to see Kenneth Clark in those civilization films at the Smithsonian. Really, what a blessing. What a blessing. And then, the Oxford year, and I'm so thrilled to have some Oxford friends here, who are lifetime friends. That program for sophomores, history and English majors, extraordinary. We're there with tutors who scared the life out of us, but we learned how to write, we learned how to help one another, and the travel through Europe, transformative. Absolutely incredible. What a gift. And then you add going to Japan. Going to Japan after I was deeply disillusioned, frankly, after Nixon was elected, worked for my government, all the Democrats lifelong, and so on. And I said, I'm not coming back until Nixon is out of office. And that actually happened. Unfortunately, I was in a Zen retreat. This is 73, 74. I come out of the Tokyo subway, and there's the headline, Nixon resigns. Oh, I can talk. But the opportunity to teach at this university, this Notre Dame Station Women's University, was extraordinary. Because I learned so much. I traveled through Japan, but in those years, I traveled all through Asia on the way home. Completely different place. And that really changed my life in terms of studying the ancient traditions, etc. So that kind of experience and the gratitude that I feel culminates in what we're celebrating today, that Pat mentioned. It's a values-based education, right? This is a values-based education. And while it's a little unfair to tell stories or make comparisons, we've been very fortunate to be at Yale for 17 years, these last 17 years, and to teach at other extraordinary universities. I think it's all about the universe wants something to open up. But where has it opened up in a remarkable way? Here at Trinity, with faculty who you'll hear from and students who are embracing this key topic. And I'm going to say, really, it's so inspiring. And when we were here for the reunion in the spring, I was amazed at our class, their generosity, they're getting it. I said to one friend, I said, well, how is it that our class got this so readily? And she said, well, we grew up with social justice. To go to environmental justice is the right step. But I want to tell you, it took Yale until 2 years ago to hire people in this area. That is how siloed we are. Science is going to do this. Policy is going to do it. Law is going to do it. Economics, technology. That's the path we're on. The values, leave them over here, because science can't deal with it. I could make the rest of the talk on this topic alone. When we have a marriage, a meshing, a fusion, an attempt to say we cannot do anything further from this point on about the environment unless we include environmental justice at the top of the list and eco-spirituality, as we're going to talk about, a spiritual value. And I'll just say, because I had a wonderful conversation at dinner with dear friends, we are in a state, as you know, of tremendous crisis, of incredible urgency. Those of you who have children and grandchildren, this is the moment, and that's why we can step up to support this. But even more importantly, with all that urgency, the eco-anxiety that we're living with, that our students living with, we, in 50 years of academia, 45 of which we've been teaching, there's never been a generation more prepared, more ready, more charged up with ideas than now. It's the moment of now, and we can give an intergenerational handshake to these students, to the next generation, and we can do this. That's my message. I have to say, as you would know, none of this, while this was a great women's college, and I so value the women's part of it, helping women to gain their voices. They used to say liberation, women's liberation is articulation. It has taken me a long, long time, even public speaking. And I want to give the biggest shout out here to the person who has supported that journey, John Freeman.
Wonderful.
Done this together.
Wonderful to be here with you all, Mary Evelyn. The sense of gratitude that flows through all of us into this event today, especially celebrating the 125th anniversary of Trinity. President McGuire, your remarks illuminate all of us in the suncast, and your introduction lifts us up, gives us the encouragement to go on. That intergenerational handshake is really important for all of us, I think, to know that this work involves the generations we speak across these worlds. Now, I'm here, obviously, to page turn on the music stand for Mary Evelyn. You can feel her passion. But it's wonderful to ride on these coattails and to feel the voice of women rising up in our community and men that have the capacity to enter into that partnership together.
See what I mean? This is total partnership, no page turning, but we're going to launch in here. So here's the overview, telling you what you're going to hear, and we'll recap. So we're going to start with defining eco-spirituality, which I think people are getting more and more. And that linked with eco-justice. This is the big picture of a program like this and a movement going forward. It's wisdom and compassion, awe and action going together. So we also want to share something of the origins of this vision, Ecology book, or what inspired us to do it. Our teacher will be in the middle was Thomas Berry, who was married, who happened to be a priest, but he called himself a geologian. He was way beyond the confines of the church and exploded into the universe. And Pope Francis, as will be mentioned several times today, I used to say to my mother, if we have an encyclical from a pope who is loved, authentic, believable on the environment, we have a chance. And this is the most important document, as Bill McKibben says, of the 21st century. It's extraordinary. And then we're going to conclude with the indigenous traditions in ecology, where John has been involved on his coattails. and conclude with the journey of the universe, which brings us together in a large picture. So, if we begin, what is eco-spirituality? Many definitions, of course, but it's an appreciation for the sacred universe out of which Earth evolved. It's valuing the complexity of Earth and the interdependence of all life systems. And that's why it's so great when the sciences are strong, but get this complexity to awe and wonder and beauty. It's a realization that human life emerged from the universe and Earth. It's not zapped in from the outside, much as the Sistine Chapel is beautiful. We have a new story of where we've come from. Thus, we are responsible for the continuity of the Earth community. Now, ecological justice, then, paired with that, it includes social justice and sustainable use of natural resources. It implies seeing nature as intrinsically valuable and as a source of human well-being. It's not just instrumentally, utilitarianly valuable. That's value change. And environmental justice brings the focus on the human. It's the response to the unfair exposure of minorities, the poor, and people of color, to pollution of air, water, and soil due to extractive industries. Every city in our country and cities all over the world have these problems. Now, Robert Bullard, I hope he'll become a household word here. Some people call him the father of environmental justice, but there are people who preceded him, and I won't go through the names. But this is a field for 40 years, and we're catching up to it in education. Now, the social justice movement, as I said, and civil rights, we grew up in an apartheid society. Separate but equal was fine. Housing, education, religion, bathrooms, cafes. But it was morally acceptable until religious leaders and laity raised their voices. And that's what inspired me here at Trinity, and that's what inspires this movement that we're trying to do. Now, one other great figure, I hope you know, is Reverend William Barber, who picked up what Martin Luther King and others started here when we were students in the 60s, the Poor People's Campaign. And he's calling it a moral force for change. He is probably the most important African-American religious leader in the country these days. And you can see him on YouTube and so on. Now, eco-justice and well-being. That humans and nature are connected, how obvious. But I'm telling you, our School of the Environment, the 125-year-old school, all about science, not about humans. Okay? The divinity school, maybe social justice, but not the environment, until very recently. But here we have the destruction of healthy ecosystems, forests, fisheries, rivers, and wetlands. Human communities around the world, the developing world, they are suffering obviously from pollution, climate disasters, Ian, so recently, floods, fires, and droughts. Now, why is this also a public health issue? This is where the rubber meets the road. So in Warren County, North Carolina, this is where environmental justice actually began. And the UCC churches began a movement with Ben Chavez and so on to say you cannot take trucks with PCBs and dump them in Warren County, 62% African American, and have the roads and the land completely polluted. And people got out and were laying on the ground. And 10 years later, the 17 principles for environmental justice were written down. So as I say, we're building on a movement, and we're building on heroic people, mothers, their children, their health. Look at Flint, Michigan. It's heartbreaking. Water. Jackson, Mississippi. They knew about this forever. Cancer Alley, Louisiana. They just had a march here in D.C. with Cancer Alley people marching to the White House saying, this is a climate emergency. Europe calls it a climate emergency. We can barely call it change. The levels around the world of people understanding this and of minority communities calling for action is huge, so important, and exciting. Anacostia River, perhaps we'll hear about that this afternoon, right here in D.C. The east side has been polluted, changing, getting cleaner, and so on. every city in this country has these problems.
When we came to our graduate studies, and Mary Evelyn and I were in history of religion studying with Thomas Berry, and he made us aware of this kind of statement. Thomas Berry would say, we have ethics for homicide and suicide and even genocide, but not for biocide or eocide. This sense of ecocide, the sense of the cutting or the interior death of the life forms itself, of the ecological forms. So it was that question that we put to ourselves: how do we as historians of religion contribute to understanding these problems? My own studies among Northern Plains indigenous people, and pictured here are our Crow parents who took us into their family, Violet Medicine Horse and Adam Burning Ground. And they're pictured here. One day I said to Adam and Violet, we should have a picture that I could use in teaching. They said, that's a great idea. Violet said, let's go outside and you can see the Bighorn Mountains in the distance. And Adam said, well, let's put on our Native American traditional garb for the peyote way. They're members of the Baptist Church. They're traditional Crow people. And this began to give me this larger realization that as Thomas Berry had taught me intellectually and experientially, I was learning from indigenous elders how to understand these issues in new ways, in the context of their traditions. In other words, a kind of Crow environmental justice too. These people have their own name outside of the English term Crow. It's Apsaloke. It's a mythic bird. So they carry within them their stories of themselves from the distant past. So I attended from the 1980s, I attended ceremonials and Mary Evelyn would come and join me. And this is a picture somewhat of an everyday activity on the Northern Plains. How the Crow still use traditional teepees in their ceremonial occasions. They live in houses much as you and I, but ceremonially they come back to their original habitat. And just to capture the mood of this picture, the women are preparing food. And you notice our sister-in-law, Magdalene in the yellow shirt, she's helping to organize activities. The nurturing dimension of religion among these people, the sense of providing an understanding of the larger life way of the people through nourishment. This is a nourishment that attends this particular ceremonial, which we call in English Sundance, but the Crow call Ashkise Liswa. Ashkise is what we're looking at. Ashkise means big lodge. This is a lodge which is built on the day of this ceremonial. It's a cosmic lodge. Every timber is named, every pole going to the middle, the center pole, which if you notice is one on the bottom and has 3 stripes for the number of days that the dancers who go into this lodge will go without food or water. In other words, the Crow undertake a ceremonial to renew themselves as a people, but they renew themselves in the context of the larger biodiversity. They're renewing this, for you notice the buffalo head on the middle, on the central pole. There's an eagle up in the upper branches. This sense of reaching out into the world and renewing their world as they renew themselves. The dancers then, and I've had the opportunity to participate 10 times in this particular ceremony, the dancers go into the Ashkase lodge and they undertake liswa. They dance. They dance for 3, 4, or 5 days without food or water. They undertake this deprivation in order to enter into a deep experience of renewal for their people. Not only ceremonial, symbolic life, but what I've learned also from indigenous teachers is the social justice, sovereignty for indigenous people goes hand in hand with ecological or environmental justice. So while my early studies as a historian of religion were very focused on symbolic and ceremonial life, I was very clearly and early brought into an understanding that what indigenous people wanted to recover was their voice, their own right to free, prior, and informed consent about what happens. And this is where indigenous elders went to the United Nations. So of the three activities centered here in this picture, the middle one pictures UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. This is an amazing document, and for indigenous people, it's at the central globally for indigenous people globally. And one of the major statements in this document is the emphasis that in indigenous lands or territories, the right to free and informed and prior consent of indigenous people is held forward very carefully. So this sense then of environmental and social justice embedded in this eco-spirituality life way.
So these were extraordinary experiences, as you can see. And in fact, I feel, frankly, and I don't say this publicly almost ever, but the Sundance and John's participation in it has been the foundation for our work, because it's indescribable what happens there. But a great sacrifice for all people, all species, not just praying for themselves. So that's been part of this long journey. Now, thanks to Trinity, I went to Japan in 73, 74 to teach at the Notre Dame Station Women's University, which changed my life. But looking at this beautiful picture of Fuji, and then we know that the pollution began about in the 70s in Japan. So they put their polluting industries overseas. Not exactly eco-justice, is it? And when I went to China in 85, here was Guilin in the south, beautiful rivers, clean air, and so on. And as you know, this is, along with India, the most polluted country in the world. There are dead fish from toxic chemicals and so on. But we've been to China many, many times, and India as well. You can barely breathe in Beijing, and everybody gets colds and so on and so forth. So I began to see what was happening with rapid industrialization, but I also was very, very fortunate in this period before modernization and living in Japan to study these traditions. I began with Buddhism, a lot of study of Zen, doing Zen meditation and so on, and met some of the most extraordinary Zen masters. Some of them would come later to where we were teaching and teach with our students, an incredible leader from one of the great Zen temples in Tokyo, in Kyoto. But as well, I began to be very interested in Confucianism. And why? Because that is the cultural DNA of East Asia. It's not just an ethical system, but it's a system of reciprocity, of concentric circles, where the human is embedded in family, society, education, politics, nature, and the cosmos itself. So they understand the expanse of you cultivate yourself, you educate yourself for a common good, for something that is going to contribute not just to your individualism, but to a larger common good. And this is a picture of one of the great academies in the pre-modern period in Japan, hugely influential all across East Asia, Confucianism. And the third tradition is Shinto. This is a torii, a gate in Hiroshima, actually, one of the most famous Shinto shrines. And it's in the water. It marks the water as sacred, as special. Mountains, rivers, even land, all of that is sacred. Kami is the dwelling of the sacred in nature itself. So it's an indigenous tradition. So Asian spiritual values began to be so invigorating for me. I felt the Western ones were not sufficient for our times. So Buddhism, with its sense of interdependence, interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say. Confucianism also has this idea of qi, a unifying life force of matter and energy. No dualisms here. And these traditions do not have the radical dualism of mind and body and heart and head. The word for heart and mind is one character in all across East Asia. So you do your Qigong, which I do, or Tai Chi, traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, is to get the Qi flowing. This is health, well-being in relation to nature. Fabulous. thousands of years old. It works. Chinese cities are out there doing their Tai Chi in the early morning and at night. It's incredible. And Shinto, of course, with this sense of the sacred in nature. Now, we show these of our pathway to say, how did this project arise? Well, in part because of the realization that China and Japan, China and India, with, I checked it last night, 2.4 billion in China, sorry, 1.4 billion in China, 1.3 billion in India. Okay, that's like almost a third of the world. They have, by industrializing, changed their environments radically, and people are suffering enormously. There are cities, there's over 100 cities of over 1 million people, many of them with 20 and 30 million people. On this continent, there's only 10 over 1 billion, nowhere near these sizes. Just imagine health, well-being, equity, justice. So the ecological destruction has been incredible, and they know it. And also, though, we felt there's a need for a culturally based, culturally grounded environmental ethics. It's not going to have Christian bases or Western philosophy. No. And these nature-based religions are ones that helped us think this through, began the conferences at Harvard and so on. And again, repeating, but reinforcing that abolition and religious leaders, like Quakers, were key to our thinking, civil rights and religious leaders. MLK, but John Lewis and Jesse Jackson, these people, they were all here. They were shouting and screaming, and they still are, and they should be. I mean, you take John Lewis, there's just, what a heart of gold, you know. Okay, so this moral force for social change goes into eco-justice. Educational institutions of these religions have enormous outreach. The Jesuits alone is the largest educational system in the world, and they're adopting Laudato Si. So, sort of finally, in this part, problems and promise of religion. We know historically how wretched they have been in certain ways. We know at present the dark side of these religions. But 85% of the world's people identify with them. They've got to be part of the discussion going forward. And the promise of this eco-spirituality and eco-justice is what we're holding forth. That our Yale dean who brought us there said 17 years ago, science, policy, law, economics, technology, necessary but not sufficient. He founded NRDC, the largest law environment group in the country, and so on. And he was head of the World Resources Institute. He was the Carter administration. We need a broader spiritual force. And he's spiritual, not religious, which of course is key. And finally then, that's what we are trying to do. Open up the space that's beyond, that attends to religions in their more formal aspects, but also in a broader sense, humans are spiritual, meaning-making animals. Look at a law professor at NYU. I just love this. A religious attitude for spiritual involves moral and cosmic convictions beyond simply a belief in God. That people have an innate, inescapable responsibility to make something valuable of their lives, and that the natural universe is gloriously, mysteriously wonderful. How fabulous is that?
So it was in the 1090s.
Clap for Dorgan.
We had the opportunity, while we were at Harvard at the Center for the Study of World Religions, to join with the director in establishing a series of conferences that focused on particular religious traditions. So you notice in the upper red, the volume on indigenous traditions and ecology, we had indigenous elders and leaders from every continent on the globe, over 150 participants, and over 110 were indigenous leaders themselves. And you notice the volumes that came out of these conferences, the Western traditions, East Asian and South Asian traditions. It was an effort to explore what these religions had in their past traditions, interactions with the natural world, and retrieve them, bring them forward in these discussions, and to understand a reevaluative perspective. Did they say anything to contemporary societies? And if so, how might they reconstruct themselves? So these volumes were a way of making this early statement in the mid-90s into the turn of the 2000s on this question of religion and ecology. Prior to that, we've had an Ecology and Justice series with the press Orbis books, and these publications have been very helpful for us in bringing another voice into the question. You notice some of these volumes are dealing with cosmological perspectives and water and the sense of women's rights also in these issues. But in the center, Leonardo da Boff. Leonardo is a prominent Brazilian liberation theologian. This is a major influence on Pope Francis. So his work, Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor, is actually cited in Laudato Si, and this was again a conduit for the ideas of these religion and ecology projects to flow into Laudato Si. So it was in 1998, we established the Forum on Religion and Ecology, and then when we came to Yale in 2006, we established and brought that forum there. And the website, which is indicated here, gives a very good perspective on the academic field that we've been trying to develop. And this website contains statements from religious leaders. It has scriptural references, bibliographies that are annotated, and also the first indication that there are now 15 graduate programs in the United States in religion and ecology. When we began this project at Harvard in the 1990s, there was no field of religion and ecology. So this has begun to swell, and the force or the engaged side of this project is also gone in tandem with the academic. So it's not just intellectually abstract, but engaged projects, on-the-ground projects, tree planting, forest renewal, the sense of water cleanup. All of these then are important dimensions of the academic field, this engaged force. And on the website, we've developed a very robust eco-justice hub, which will be important for students here at Trinity. We've also developed now 9 online classes on both Journey of the Universe and 6 courses on religions and ecology. So we've made an effort to expand the possibilities of engaging the topic online also. At the field I've mentioned, and again, just to return to the force for change in society, that this project in religion and ecology has tried to bring the focus around towards protection, this idea which comes out of indigenous traditions also. It's not just resistance to change, it's rather protection of what nurtures life. We need to protect this sacred earth community. The resistance then to exploitation with eco-justice, and now we are aware of these concepts. We're aware of communities in which projects have been imposed upon them. Cancer Alley in Louisiana, where the sense now of eco-justice in tandem with eco-spirituality for the resilience, the sense of energizing ourselves while we're doing this work, because it is demanding and it is difficult for communities who have had these pressures put upon them. How to bring them into an understanding of their own resilience also. Foremost among this has been the encounter with our teacher, Thomas Berry. Mary Evelyn has mentioned his taking the title Geologian. And I think that brought him into, you can see the top Dream of the Earth publication. It brought him into a realization that the human dreams, especially the dream in this country, that we use the term American dream, that Thomas Berry began to see that was an increasingly empty and misdirected dream. That the American dream, he felt, needed to be revitalized, reimagined. And so he titled an essay in 1978, The New Story. And what was he thinking? He was trying to dream. The dream of the human is the dream of the earth. And the dream of the earth for Thomas Berry, as the book on the opposite side, was not simply limited to our local bioregions, but rather the universe itself. the Earth as the most immediate experience we have of the larger universe. And so the story, as he saw it, was the evolving evolution of the universe itself. That is our story also. Underneath it then, the great work is his effort to emphasize that this will not happen simply through intellectual processes. We need to roll up our sleeves. We need to do the great work. And as a cultural historian, he began to realize every people who have understood themselves in relationship to the world around them have undertaken that great work. And he would talk about the Gothic cathedrals and say, there were stone, people carrying stone. And you'd ask them, what are you doing? And they would say, I'm simply carrying stone. But the next person might say, I'm building a Gothic cathedral. The understanding of the work that we're undertaking, what's happening at Trinity now with this program. It's a great work that's being unrolled and rediscovered in this setting. At the end of his life, Thomas Berry was writing books like Evening Thoughts, emphasizing that all through the stages of life, we need to understand this work calls us in different ways. And so we find this intergenerational handshake is very important to give younger people a sense they are not in this alone. We are not simply abandoning them to the problems they perceive that we have developed. It's a mutual, it's an intergenerational handshake we need to undertake. So Thomas Berry would realize also that eco-spirituality was crucial to this project. At its core, he would say, even our spirituality is earth-derived. The human and the earth are totally implicated, each in the other. If there is no spirituality in the earth, then there is no spirituality in ourselves. So it's as if he saw in the Sistine Chapel that image of the divine reaching over and touching the human, that touch, embedded in that touch was the whole of biodiversity. It's no longer adequate to see simply a transcendent reality and the human is receiving everything and then aggrandizing it to ourselves. This realization that we are embedded in a spirituality in the earth. This presence then, we can no longer hear the voice of the rivers, the mountains, that presence that he was trying to evoke in students that he taught. The trees and the meadows are no longer intimate modes of spiritual presence. That's what we've lost, he felt. The world about us has become an it rather than a thou. So his effort was to recover intimacy, affectivity, and to realize this reciprocity needed to be recovered. It is this renewed sense of reciprocity with nature in all of its complexity and remarkable beauty that can help provide the psychic and spiritual energies necessary for the work ahead. So these are some of the components of eco-spirituality that we've tried to encourage in this work. Carrying from Thomas Berry and our encounter with him, there's certain key ideas that we have continued to use in our teaching. Emphases, as I've indicated, upon the sacred universe. His point, we dwell in the sacred universe. You can feel his resonance here with some of the philosophical language about dwelling in the world, dwelling in a sacred universe, not simply limiting it to the earth, but emphasizing that the earth community is our encounter with the voices that have evolved with us. Each existent being is telling its story. He would say the earth of the universe is not simply a collection of objects, but it's a communion of subjects. The subjectivity, the voices of all reality then are necessary for all of our flourishing. And the great work then is to create that flourishing.
So we have to clap for Thomas Berry. I'm sorry. So it's hard to emphasize what 1,000 people showed up for his memorial in New York. He's probably the most beloved person in this area, and for many reasons. But he did inspire this encyclical that is now gaining so much traction, that Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor. He said to Leonardo, the most famous liberation theologian in Latin America, Leonardo, you cannot liberate humans without the earth. And Leonardo got this conjunction of eco-spirituality and eco-justice. So that is the heart of this encyclical. Now, there's a broad invitation that the Pope put forward the first time. It wasn't just to Catholics, the first time to Christians all over the world. He's very good friends with the Orthodox Patriarch Bartholomew, who he cites from the very beginning, because Bartholomew says, this is crimes against creation. This is ecological sin. These are good friends. And he's calling out people of all religions, spiritual people, seekers, unprecedented in 2,000 years of Catholic history. So the response of the world's religions has been overwhelming. They've developed their own statements in response. They're wanting to work with this Laudato Si movement. At the beginning of October, this new film's come out called The Letter. 800,000 people watched it on the first day, and since then, 8 million people have watched it. And I can tell you, I'm in a small committee on Laudato Si, the Vatican do these Zoom calls. Around the world, people are really paying attention to this encyclical. We have, shall we say, rather conservative bishops here. Have you noticed? We got to speak out. We have to speak out. Next generations, this is at risk. So Laudato Si is moving forward in many parts of the world. That's the good news. Now, the response of environmentalists has been astonishing. Our dean at Yale said, you've got to do something on this as great scientists, even before it came out, with standing room only, people from the law school and so on. They are waiting for this value-based approach. Bill McKibben, I hope you know who he is, one of the great heroes of the environmental movement, said after giving a huge talk at Yale breakfast the next morning, this is the most important document of the 21st century. This is amazing responses, you see. Now, he begins with science. He doesn't begin by pointing to the gospel or something. He begins with the science. And then he goes to a sense of eco-spirituality, of awe and wonder and beauty and the mystery of the universe. It's what our great poets, painters, writers have spoken about for years. The arts understand this. So the harmony of creation in each creature, this interdependence of all life, the universal communion, the natural environment is a collective good. This is poetic language. One of the greatest writers in India came and gave a talk at Yale and ended the whole thing by saying, this is a literary masterpiece. Amitav Ghosh. He's amazing. Okay, now you get to the problems in this middle section. It begins with science, goes to awe, wonder, beauty, and then he gives us the problem. It doesn't begin with the problem, so we all get eco-anxiety. But he says, an instrumental use of nature for humans is the beginning of the problem, right? Because it says nature's dead. This is what Barry kept saying. No, it's not dead, it's living. Indigenous people have understood this, Asian traditions understood. Consumerism and waste. We are the most wasteful country in the world. Europeans come here and freak out. Everything besides meals, etc. We can do something about this. We can. People did it during the Second World War. They had their victory gardens and so on. So he's asking us to change in a very practical way. Market-based solutions, necessary but not sufficient. I'm not knocking market-based solutions. They're very, very important. We can talk about them and so on. But if it has a premise that economic progress without limits is going to get us somewhere, that's the undoing. And that's the heart of new ecological economics that are emerging. And then he goes to solutions, and these are eco-justice solutions. Ecology, economics, equity, ethics, integrated for action, a principle of the common good, not just individuals, solidarity with poor and refugees. He's a huge supporter of the refugees coming across the Mediterranean, and this intergenerational eco-justice. He's offering us many ways, as we know, measuring our carbon footprint, alternative and renewable energies, divestment from fossil fuels, restoration projects such as John's just mentioned, and advocacy and organizing. Let me just say, the divestment movement, which Bill McKibben began about 12 years ago, and people were like, oh, forget it. Yale is like, oh, forget it, and Harvard, oh, forget it. And students marched on the football field and so on. They want this. Divestment from fossil fuels. There's now $40 trillion of divestment. One of the largest movements in 12 to 15 years. A third of that is from religious communities because they don't want their pensions in these kinds of earth-destroying operations. So, to conclude this section, The Glasgow conference last year, this top conference of the parties on climate change, UN organized it. The largest groups there on the outside of the discussions were youth. We have tremendous movements that we need to support. In this country, it's Sunrise Movement. Over there, it's a whole range, Extinction Rebellion, and so on and so forth. But the other groups were religious leaders and communities and indigenous peoples. And so we're going back to the voices of indigenous peoples in these conferences, and other minority groups has been rising.
As we come towards the end of our talk, we wanted to return to an emphasis on indigenous peoples and their implementation of their thought now in many forms where they are bringing their understanding of the sacred universe in relationship to language like Mother Earth and kinship with all biodiversity and creatures. Their sense of Earth community is intimately related, and the relational dynamics and the communion of subject is a realization among indigenous people. There's a differentiated sentience or a felt experience of the world in animals, birds, fish, and trees, something that Jane Goodall has made Western science very much aware of also. And the great work in indigenous communities is very striking in rethinking relationality. I wanted to bring forward Robin Wald Kimmer, the Potawatomi botanist. Many of you are clapping know her work braiding sweetgrass, and in that work, this botanist is weaving indigenous traditional environmental knowledge with scientific knowledge. It's a powerful text where she speaks as a mother about her own feelings of her daughters growing up and what it means to her as a mother, as a teacher with her students and as the field, and as an indigenous woman who lost her Potawatomi language and is attempting to recover it. So there's a sense, a very palpable sense, that her focus on traditional environmental knowledge is as a way of knowing. It's repositioning knowing as an action that inspires the protection of nature, and that the science community is also very receptive now to this rediscovery of inner sentience of being as ways of knowing. This becomes very evident in the indigenous environmental action that we see now around the planet. There's one example, and this is not the only one, but in 2016, the running of a Dakota access pipeline through the middle of North Dakota was moved closer to the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota, and the Hunkpapa people there, the Lakota people, stood up, especially the young people. They began this camp movement, and they brought a protest to the pipeline, and they framed that protest as protection of water. You can see by the signage that they used during these demonstrations, defending the sacred. They were not positioning themselves as simply resisting the pipeline. They saw the pipeline itself as problematic because of the potential for leaking, and this energy company had a problem in this regard. They had a history of leaks in their pipeline, and that the Missouri River then and the water that came to the reservation was endangered by virtue of this pipeline. So their sense of understanding it was of protection of a relative, water as a maternal nurturing for the people. So also in many traditions we've seen reaching out from indigenous peoples into the mainstream religions, and at the Vatican there was an Amazonian synod in 2019 where indigenous elders and their traditional environmental knowledge, they gave voice to it at the Vatican, and Francis himself apologized to indigenous people. Bartholomew of the Eastern Orthodox tradition had gone to the Amazon itself years earlier to undertake the same kind of exchange of apology with the indigenous elders. So the project here is an opening of indigenous people to the larger life community.
Okay, we're at the end almost. And this is what we've been talking about all kinds of projects, movements in religion and ecology, despite the problems, the promise, and especially the movements of environmental justice that are exploding based with this eco-spirituality. So with all that in mind, This took us 10 years to do this project, but it was way longer in the making. So Journey of the Universe is this epic story of cosmic, Earth, and human evolution. Okay, never been told in film form. The first time it was told in book form was 92 with Barry and Brian Swift, our dear friend and collaborator, who is a scientist, and he is also indigenous on his father's side from Salish people, British Columbia, which he almost never mentions, but it's part of this project that's coming together of various forms of knowledge. So it's indebted to the new story that Thomas Berry brought forward in 78. American Dream is a materialist story. We don't have stories that bring forth our meaning, our values. It wasn't an Emmy Award-winning film. It was on PBS for 3 years. We never mentioned God. We don't put overtly religious language in there to appeal to the widest possible audience. There's a book from Yale Press. There's podcasts and interviews I did with scientists ranging from the early universe all the way down to the formation of atoms and the geology of the planet and so on. And as well, with environmentalists for whom this large context actually gives them the energy and inspiration for the action. And we've put 3 courses on Coursera. So it's had a wide appeal to next generations, to our students and so on. It's been shown in schools and universities. Sure, you can use it anytime you want. So we'll give you the link. It is on Amazon now, but any of these materials, we're happy to send you copies of the book or whatever. And a curriculum's been developed. There's a school that's using this, a grammar school. High schools are using it now. And before the pandemic, when we showed it in China, at Yale Beijing Center, 77,000 people watched it online. Why? Because their tradition has this cosmological and earth sensibility. And I'd write the characters on the board like, this is for heaven. You know, the sense of the cosmos over and directing everything. And they were so excited, and we had Confucian scholars presenting, this goes with your tradition, you know? It's meshing, it's coherent. So this cosmic and earth eco-spirituality is an appreciation for the vastness of the universe. It is 14 billion years old. Your parents, my parents, grandparents didn't know this, didn't understand. That's what's so exciting about our moment. We have a new sense of who we are, how we belong, out of which this earth and life evolves. It's amazing. So you take the great flaring forth. Look at the pictures that are coming from the Webb telescope. Scientists are weeping in the face of this mystery of the universe, right? You come to these stellar nebula where the clouds are coming together to form stars and then bursting in spewing out all the elements of the universe. So all the elements of life come from stardust. Carl Sagan said a long time ago, we are stardust. We say in the film, big stars are our ancestors. This is amazing, and we only have a glimpse of it, of what it means. Here's galaxies colliding and so on, this creative, dynamic, and chaotic dimension of the universe. There's a whole new spirituality there, and it is emerging, and to me, one of the most exciting ways forward. Here's a picture in central Pennsylvania when we taught at Bucknell. A fantastic geologist who helped us with this film took this. We can see the Milky Way. Just imagine taking this for good students and saying, just write your responses. You know, let's do a film or a poem on this and so on. We've got to create the imaginative space to absorb this sense we're living in a universe that has birthed us. Now, what does this evoke in us?
We focus on reverence, respect, and responsibility, obviously terms that resonate with religious traditions also. This sense of reverence is embedded in understanding, valuing the complexity of Earth and ecological interdependence of all life systems. We realize that when we see these lunar eclipses and our relationship to the sunrise every day and sunset, the beauty and wonder of the Earth that we encounter, this evokes in us this deep respect.
So a realization that all life is connected. How obvious, and yet we have to make it real. And that we emerged here on Earth after billions of years of evolution. Earth is 4.6 billion years, but it took 1 billion years for the first cell to emerge. So another billion for multicellular life to emerge. We are an explosive, created, alive planet. We may have life elsewhere in the universe, but why not preserve this magical, mysterious new planet? And that's what became clear. Do you remember, some of you in '68? It was a world-defining moment. Even seeing it now, there's no place that can give us that sense of the blackness surrounding this water-based planet. Absolutely inspirational, still, I would argue. And the responsibility then for the future of life, we're responsible for the care and continuity. We know we are at the edge. We are at a very critical point. We're in an extinction period as a species and so on. So can we align ourselves with these creative processes of evolution and ecology for the mountains, for the rivers, for the rainforests, the rivers, the fish in coral reefs, the birds, humans, next generations. That's what this is all about, our concluding slide.
So the call, obviously in the religious traditions and of the universe itself, is a reorienting. We begin to orient ourselves to the cosmos.
And ground ourselves in these Earth's living systems.
And realize what all of the religious have been teaching us about nurturing, that these rituals bring us into water, air, and food in very special, focused ways.
And transforming us with energy for action. We're in this period of looking for alternative energies of a physical sort, and we can do this. We've got water, right? We have solar. These are the energies of the earth that we're transforming into action for a sustainable future. But the missing link, and Trinity can do this, as well as other communities, is the spiritual energy going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So proud to claim Mary Evelyn as an alum. John, we must have to claim you as an alum also. Well, wasn't that just moving and inspiring? Really? And we will take some questions now before we take a break. So I would love to have you participate. If you have a comment or a question, please raise your hand, and the ever-wonderful Assistant Provost Kathleen Tolliver has the microphone for you. So here we go. Our very first question, comment. Please tell us who you are. I know who you are, but introduce yourself anyway, Mrs. Ferrante.
Yes, I'm Joan Pomano from Class of 63. I live in Montgomery Village. I apologize, I was a little bit late, but I'm almost brought to tears. I have two children. My brother and her husband are environmental biologists, so I have this in my life, which we all need to have. I mean, if I ever have paper towels and they come, they get hidden, believe me. We still do have one thing in our house, but they don't. So I'll leave that to your imagination. I didn't want to stay today. I'm really serious. I have two grandchildren in middle school. I'm here out of here. I should have taken them out of school today. I'm here. This is amazing. I've been taking pictures of these. Can we get these slides that you have here, I tried to take some pictures, but yes.
So this was filmed and live streamed, and it will be available later.
Yes.
So, and all the slides everything we do is open source.
Okay,
So,
all right,
yeah.
because my 8th grade boy, I mean, he's living this.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
He is, because they're growing up different than we did. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I'm born in 1941. It's my parents' generation who almost abused the earth because they were beginning to have a little bit more. So they were using, and putting their houses on the beach and all that. So we really didn't grow up with this. But I really feel fortunate that I think that my grandchildren's generation are very, very conscious of this, and you have a lot more encouraging it. So God bless us. We're doing a good job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep. That we have up here.
Yeah, she has a microphone. Then you'll come forward. Okay.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Doty, Community Class of 65. I think this is a terrifically inspiring talk with a wonderful vision. Our political system is so messed up. I'm not sure if any candidate or senator could articulate such vision and be elected. So how do we put this into practice, given our political system?
And, I suggest we might collect the other two up here in the front, the questions, and then maybe we can answer them to agree.
I was wondering if you could comment on the similarities between Barry's philosophy and Teilhard de Chardin's. And is it an alternative philosophy, or is it a progression of the philosophy?
Thank you. Right next to us.
My question was just simple. You might repeat the name of the Brazilian scientist who...
Oh, Leonardo Boff, the liberation theologian.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that B-A?
B-O-F-F.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm in class 21, and I want to just say, when I entered school, I became a science major, and can you hear me better?
Yeah.
I became a science major, and I was torn because I was raised by indigenous values, and all through my life, parents who were vegetarian, home birth, breastfeeding, alternative medicine, raising us in meditation, and part of my upbringing was kind of anti-academics because it was like took you away from an appreciation for nature and a reverence for life, and to like this void of I know everything, but I'm disconnected from it all. And so when I came into university, I knew that I needed another side to challenge, the anti-side, and to kind of see where is the middle ground between academic science and indigenous living.
Yeah.
And I was not sure about my major. I was confused because I never wanted to move away from an emphasis on honoring the values of indigenous living, bringing that back onto the earth as a key to sustainability, integrating life-changing practices on a community level, nutrition, hygiene, composting, gardening, the simple practices that become, commonplace, and to address food insecurity, health disparities, preventative disease, to address mass consumerism, to encourage productivity, creativity, to bring back the crafts. So I had all these values in mind, and I did not know, where in the field of, professional fields, where that would fit. And so going through Trinity, with my professors guiding me along the way, I had a kind of like a crossroad moment because I entered pre-med because I wanted to address health disparities. And there was a conflict in my indigenous values and what I saw as a requirement of pre-med, so I backed away. And I was about to change my major to education. And Dr. Shea right there, she's like, hold on, let's talk. And she took me and I was telling her, look, I can't do this because these are my values and this is who I am and I'm not going to compromise this. And she said, well, look, you're so great at science. There's more to science than what you think. And she's like, well, what are you interested in? I said, I would like to educate, but also I would like to, deal with sustainability and eco-consciousness. And immediately, I found an internship in which I could draft curriculum for PG County middle schoolers. And I created an environmental justice curriculum teaching about composting as well as food insecurity, the meaning of food deserts, which they had no idea what it was, and health disparities, and help them to see how this is a problem in their community and even in their school. And so from there, I had this epiphany about science. I think that's when the reality of being a science was born. It was like, oh, I'm a scientist. It's not just about being a white man in a white lab coat in a sterile lab and looking in the microscope all the time, because I was not interested in that whatsoever. I like to be in the dirt. I like to be in nature, not in a, boring, sterile lab. And so it was like, oh, I have to be able to redefine science based on who I am. And the importance of having that voice as African American, Indigenous, Native American, although not legally registered as one. I have to be able to have a voice and have the ability to redefine what the meaning of science is, the ability to observe, ask questions, and find experiences and bring results and solutions. Close it out.
You are amazing. Let's give it up. See, this is why I don't have to say retire. We can go to refinement because the next generation is all over this.
Right.
Okay, was there one final question? You go ahead, and then just I think if you stand up.
It's not a question.
Oh,
Is that okay?
Yeah.
My name is Ann Bender. I'm a sister of Notre Dame. I live and work in Central Florida, just having experienced the hurricane there. I work with an immigrant and migrant farm worker community for the last 50 years, class of 66. And I wonder what you think about this. My whole personality and history has been the big picture, Vermont, big change. I think that train has left the station in some sense. It's hard for me to think about doing what I can with what I have, where I am, in a more local way, because I want the big thing. I want all this like tomorrow. And I don't know what you're thinking about the efforts of local ecological work. In Florida, just all the houses on the coastline, everything that happened on the west coast, the farm, all the orchard trees, were just destroyed, and a lot of the agriculture was destroyed. So people don't have work, people don't have. So what do you think about local?
That's
the big political, picture feels so hopeless.
Yeah, no.
I want to just do something that's real and concrete. What do you think?
Think global, look local. Think global, act local. Every engaged project that we're talking about, and on our website, there's many of them. River Cleanup, Forest. That's exactly the point. So not only do I affirm it, this is why we're saying that ideas have to go into action.
Right.
This is engaged scholarship. It's not for your CV or something like that. I mean, look what was just said. So yes, yes, yes. That's the only way we can do it.
I think two areas that we're seeing in local activity is food and health. Our students are crazy about food production, food justice, and the sense that public health is concomitant areas. So this is happening all over the globe.
Yeah, and I appreciate this because as we're wrapping up here so we can have a break, you're responding in a way to this lady in the back You know, when we show Journey and we start to take questions, we say, let's not go to the political. Everybody knows it. We've got to find the nodes of change that are inspiring to do the work. Because the depression is huge, the disempowerment is monumental, and the eco-anxiety is eating away at everyone. So, what are we going to do? You know, we're not going to say we're cooked. No. I could tell you plenty about the cook stories and so on. But, so, the long term is what we have to think about. I worked politically here for years, and I said, we've got to think long term for these changes. And what is happening is actually quite astonishing. We could give you other examples. So, we still have Nancy Pelosi. We still have people who are thinking, this next generation, are thinking in Congress in huge ways. That's why I mentioned Sunrise Movement and so on. But let's come back to your question about Teilhard and Barry. Because Teilhard de Chardin, French Jesuit priests, putting together, see, we are in so many dualisms. But if we can take the dualism that matter and spirit are not separate, and the theologians are beginning to comment on this all over the place. Teilhard said matter and spirit are not separate, they're evolving from lesser complexity to greater complexity. Evolution is part of that process. East Asia has known that forever. That's what I can see in Journey to the Universe. Matter and spirit are one. We're the outcasts here with all these dualisms that are making people sick because they're alienating them from the food of the earth. We have so many mental health problems because of this alienation. So finally, and I'd love to have John comment, Barry took Teilhard's ideas, which are brilliant, luminous ideas, and said, we have to tell it as a story so that we engage people as story. And that's why we made Journey of the Universe and so on, making it accessible, inspired the action. Look at the interviews I did with all kinds of people on the ground. The work is still to be done, and we can do it.
On the Thomas Berry website, which is thomasberry.org, there's his 1978 essay, The New Story. And in that essay, he makes a very pointed connection with the thought of Teilhard de Chardin. And briefly, I think the connection is in one word, time. That what Teilhard gave to Barry was a sense that all of the ideas we think of as transcendent or simply apart from us, that they have we have evolved together with them over time, so immense periods of time. So Teilhard used a phrase that we opened a short biography. We drew on this phrase. Teilhard says, there is a spiritual, there's communion with God. And there is a communion with the earth. And there is a communion with God through the earth. So I think Teilhard was himself reflecting upon his own religious background, where there was this idea of a transcendent deity that one looked forward to going after death to paradise. And so he coined that. There's a communion with God to talk about that. And he didn't reject it. I think he acknowledges it. But he then went on, there's a communion with earth. And Teilhard was not especially aware of indigenous traditions or other religions. He did write at times about his wonderment and what it all meant. And sometimes he was off base, sometimes he understood. But he acknowledged it. He did not erase. There is a communion with the earth. And then he came to his position. There is a communion with God through the earth. For Teilhard, God was not out there, some masculine presence. It was embedded in the evolutionary process, the sense of the divine manifesting itself, as Barry would say, in the communion of subjects, the speaking world.
And I thought you were going to say, he said, I believe in God, I believe in the earth, but if I lose my faith in God, I will still believe in the earth. I think that is extraordinary. Extraordinary. That's the spirit of this whole talk. Thank you so much.